So we'll go ahead and double click the application. And what I'm going to show you is what we had talked about in that first intro clip, is that after that hour and a half of free installation, this is what you're going to see. You'll log in with your user ID. You can run a financial report, and you'll find that we are live linked to GP, and you can pull back live financial data in the budgeting program. So if I wanted to look back at my historical budgets or my historical actuals, I could go ahead and do so. And if I wanted to pull my particular department, I could bring up one department on screen. And if I was curious as to why I spent $2,700 in rent back in January of that year, I could right click and choose month or year to date transactions. So we can start with financials, spruce it up and turn on some formatting. If I had searched on my entire company, I'd actually see my data coming back for all of my departments. How do I know that? Because I can actually change this and look at this in different fashion. If I want to look at my company totals, I might have seen my top level categories across the entire company. Maybe I want to drill down and look at my division, my admin, ops, and sales divisions, and here's my payroll across the admin, the top level divisions. Maybe I want to look this down at the individual department level or cost centers. I could come down in here, look at my individual cost centers, drill down into a cost center, and then look at their expenses. So different ways that we can change the formatting on the fly. Notice I ran the report one time, and it's sitting right here on screen. Unlike Manager and Reporter, if I wanted to do that many different styles of my financials, I had to run separate reports. I hit the search button one time. I just changed the window dressing on the fly. So it kept it relatively easy. Now, this is all pivot table style reporting. Looks like it kind of feels like a pivot table report, one row after another squashed together. I can't skip lines, calculate gross margin percentages, things like that in this section, but I could do it in my custom reports. We have the ability to run variance reports in here, budget versus actual, or budget versus budget, or this year versus last year, or whatever you want. I could come in here and design a report that has a custom row layout. In here, I can have my header, I can apply some colors, I can have my accounts listed in here, I might subtotal those, I might have calculated COGS percentage or whatever it might have been, per unit sales or per unit costing, and build out my row layouts exactly what I want them. Now, these are kind of ugly but effective reports. We're not going to bend over backwards and make this look pretty enough to generate your board financials. But at the same time, they're going to look similar to the board level financials from a structural perspective, and they should satisfy your internal needs, that you could roll these out to your end department managers and say, look, you've got self-service reporting, stop bugging us. If I want to look at my variance report and I was curious as to why I was over under in any particular month, I was $115,000, $118,000 under budget for my training for the month, I can go ahead and click on that number, and it shows me a pop-up screen of my transaction details for the month, my full annual budget down below. Ideally, I would have been able to determine why I was over or under for the month, but ideally, was this a planned expenditure, yes or no? Was I missing anything? Were we off due to timing differences? Then you can drop back in and record a comment. I was over for the month because of X. We've got a little bit more reporting if you wanted to use this as a month-end reporting tool. We could come in here and let the end users generate their own transaction listings for a particular month, or maybe they want to generate a transaction details report for next year's budget, give them last year's transactions to review. If we wanted to look at our expenses and categorize and subtotal them by account, grab the account and pull it up to the header. If we don't know where we spent that money with a particular vendor, grab this down and grab the vendor ID and put that at the top. Oh, there's my expenses with Beaumont Construction. Oh, it got booked to account 6170. That was not where I expected it to go, but at least now I know where it is. So different ways we can grab multiple pieces and look at account and then vendor if we wanted to do so, and it'll automatically expand or collapse to different levels. Alrighty, enough about reporting. Let's get into the budgeting. Think of us as the Swiss Army knife of budgeting. We can support a number of different styles. We're going to show basic budget entry form is kind of a 12-month all accounts on one screen kind of classic approach for budgeting. I want to show you that we can actually change these labels on these menu items. This used to be called basic budget entry. Now it's enter your 18 budget here. I can hide the menu items. I can make it to administrator only access, but here's an example where I relabeled that menu. I'm going to choose my budget. I'm going to choose my department 100, and I'm going to go ahead and search. In here, I can instantly start budgeting. So if I want to say I'm going to spend $500 in training in January, and I can tell you why. In January, 500 for CPR training. Maybe we need to repeat that, so I'm going to copy that with a Control-C or a copy on my keyboard, and come over here and paste with my mouse, or go ahead and use Control-V on my keyboard. Maybe this is a monthly expense that we do for each of those months. Or maybe I want to do something a little bit different in March. I'm going to take that 500 plus another 2,500 plus 5,000. There's my total of 8,000 here. In March, also spending 5K for leadership offsite and another 4K for harassment awareness training. Okay, I was paying attention. They've just spent $9,500 in March, and it only says 8,000. So what's wrong, the paragraph or the number? We don't know. What we'd rather they do is actually drill down into the account and provide us line item details such that we don't have to have these complex arguments between the explanation and the line item. One other thing I'll do before we leave the screen is that if I want to take 49,000 and just do a simple budget operation, I could have spread that on a monthly basis. Or if I want to spread it on a quarterly basis, we could do something like that. I'll show you a little bit more with spreads in a second. We're going to go and drill down into the account. If the user has unsaved changes on screen, we could try to protect them before they break their data. So we can either go back and hit the save button or hit discard. Okay, this is where the magic starts to happen. We want them to come in there and itemize. Okay, I've got my CPR training, and I've got my safety trainings, and I've got harassment, etc., etc. And we come in here and I've got $500 for those workshops for CPR, and we'll do those 2 times a year. For safety, I've got $1,250 in here, and maybe I've got another $750 in January for the harassment. And simple explanation, simple line references for the dollars, and you don't have to be so detailed in the explanations. It's so much more intuitive for us to figure out what they're doing. If they want to do something a little bit more with math, rate times unit equals cost. For training, we allocate $250 per person for training expense and staff development expense. We have 5 staff in the department, and we're going to do simplified math because the accounting department taught us that you click the FX drop down to get the math operators, plus on my first row, multiply on my second row, and in the third row I'm going to put in an equals, and wow, there's my numbers. Well, we're going to have more people working in the department in the middle months have to work with us, and they're going to work with us over here over the holidays, and then they'll go back to school in the fall or in the spring for you. Let's go ahead, and now we've got a variable cost per month accounting for some changes in how we want to approach this. And maybe I have an additional cost that I know it's hard fixed, and I'm going to do that safety training over here for another $4,000. So you can have the commingling of individual expenses along with calculations all there on screen. If they run out of room and need more rows, they can add more rows all by themselves without having to bug us in finance to go fix their templates for them. They're in control. Okay, I want to do a little bit more fancy, peel the next layer off here, is that we can actually unlock the accounting data and let them take action upon that. So if they wanted to take last year's values, they could do it a couple different ways. They could go take a look at the financials, go take a look at their prior history, hit search, and they could double click this particular line, add it to the grid, add it to their shopping cart, and maybe finance told them that there is a particular inflation rate that corporate wants us to use. So I'm going to grab that inflation rate and add that to my shopping cart as well and bring it back on screen. Now I take my first row times my second row equals my third row, and I've grossed up last year's performance by that inflation rate that corporate approved of 5%, and there's my next year's budget. Another way to do that is a little bit different. So if I wanted to take my last year's spend, let's assume it's the $10,500, I could hit the show spread method in here. 10,500, I don't know why, but the accounting told me leave quantity as 1. Put my increase rate into the rate field. So I'm going to increase it by 20% over last year. 12,600 smells right. I'm going to go ahead and spread it based upon how we spent the money back in 2014's actuals. Because 17 was a bad judge, we had a lot of weather disruptions. Let's go peg it back on how things happened in 2014. The program knows to prorate that and stick that value right into a single month for you. Alternatively, if we had wanted to spread it on a budget that had a little bit more data, I could have chosen my annual budget from 17, and it would have spread it out in that fashion. So it has the history. You can have a business conversation about how do you want to budget this account next year without having to bog the user or yourselves down in finance with how to do the math. We're doing it for you. We're watching your back. Okay, so those are spread methods. Those are lookups. One other thing that I want to show you is a lot of times we'll have an IT manager, somebody in core administrative role that is looking out and inputting expenses with recurring annual contracts. We work with these particular vendors. Well, let's go find how much we spent with those vendors. Well, again, we're live linked to GP. Go look up at your history in this department from last year and stick the values in these following lines. So I can see how much I spent with my particular vendors last year and in which months that spend occurred. I can go ahead and right click and add it to my shopping cart. Boom, bring it back to the screen here, and if I didn't want to work with this telephone operator who is very costly, dropping in 2018, see below, and down here, new telco provider, see attachment for details, for contract details. And over here, I'll go ahead and I'm going to exclude that. My value was $5,800 for the month. I've dropped that one, dropped it by $2,000. I'm going to put my new contract starting the month after expiration at $1,100, half the cost, and I'll upload you a copy of the vendor contract for you to review in the original PDF format. Line item details in the line items, usually a couple lines at most. If you had a couple paragraphs, we'd ask them to use the comments screen because it's resizable, makes it easier for us to read. And if they had more than a couple paragraphs, we'd ask them to go ahead and upload the original document as an attachment. Okay, it's kind of our breadcrumbs as to how we can follow the information. If someone was curious as to why they spent $1,500 last year, they can answer their own question just by clicking one button. That one button brings back the transaction details right here on screen. Leave us alone. Stop bugging us. You can answer your own questions. Alrighty, so we showed you the basic budget entry form. We've got another stop on the way. If you want to track your progress in the budget and do workflow status tracking, they can come in here and mark their accounts as submitted as they go along the way. So when they are entering a budget, it was subtle, but it was right here on screen, is that you could have marked this as submitted or unused. So if you're not going to put $1 in it, I don't have to hound you and harass you to finish your budget. If you had told me that it was unused, I'd expect that value to stay at 0. If a manager wants to come in here and approve, they can come in here and look at these things and see everything that's submitted and not yet approved are the ones that I need to look at in my queue to finish my approvals. I could do a mass approval just by clicking here and approve everything all at one fall swoop. If you've got the fuddy-duddy manager who doesn't like that newfangled technology, you can print out the Monday morning report. Print this report to show you all of your details on one screen. You can come in here and look at your values. You can see every line item detail for every account in your department and go ahead and print that out to paper and then go have your meeting with the manager. Once they approve it, maybe their admin assistant comes back into the screen and approves for you, or maybe they call up finance and tell finance that it's approved on your behalf. Another way of looking at our budgeting is from a custom budget perspective. If you want to lay out your own columns however you see fit, we could have a couple years of history, maybe a single annual input field here in the middle to type in a value, or maybe you disable data entry and say, okay, we want you to start with this as a launch pad and get some historical perspective before you go in. At 2 years, you were budgeting $1,500. You jumped to $10,500. Next year, you're asking for $120,000. I think I'm going to call your bluff. That's the values that you put in there. You could have edited your budget by clicking in here or clicking the blue account number to drill down. But when I'm reviewing this now, I've got a custom report. maybe I'm going to say that this is the launchpad that all department heads are going to use for their data entry experience. Click on the account number, input your numbers, come back here, double check it. If the variance is too high, just know that we're going to ask for an explanation. Click the note to enter your explanation as to why you're so far over budget compared, or over spending the next year compared to last. And then we can go ahead and see your comments here on screen. So you can kind of incorporate that first pass review and push it out to the managers themselves to supply finance with that data rather than us spelunking after the fact. Move that up in the workflow a little bit. Okay, final style I want to show you was worksheet entry. Think of this as an Excel spreadsheet where there are no formulas on screen for an end user to break. So they come over here, they choose a template. It could be input the number of hours worked or number of units produced, or just take a look at last year and gross it up by X%. In this example, we build out a template that says, okay, how many hours of temporary staff services are you going to sell? This is a staffing agency. And at what rate are you going to be selling your services, and et cetera, et cetera. They can input particular drivers in here, and this value of 1.6 million is going to jump when I hit the Calculate Now button. There is no formula here for an end user to have to change in Excel and break. The formulas are hidden behind the scenes. The administrator will set up this template and will roll it out to their staff, and over here all the formulas are hidden behind the scenes. Take row 30, multiply it by row 40, multiply it by row 730, and stick that value here. Or maybe we want to do the historical report and show me a comparison to last year's data. Show me the budget for 2017 actuals. And go ahead and bring back my account number over here on this row as well. And fetch me that value. Now you've got this little builder widget here to create that statement for you, so we've kind of simplified the way that you pull data back. If I didn't want to pull it by a particular account number, but I wanted to pull back a summary of my total expenses, I've had different choices like payroll or cost of goods sold or sales or supplies or whatnot to choose from. So we've kind of simplified the ability to work with that. All of our chart of accounts reporting tags are set up over here, and you can manage the labels and use those for reporting and report design. Okay, so I'm going to show you our payroll module. You enter your employee roster in here, employee ID, first name, last name, additional reporting details. You can set up your expense definitions. It could be as simple or as detailed as you want. Maybe you have tax calculations, healthcare benefits, employee, spouse, child, and family options at different values, workers' comp or pensions. You've got lots and lots of types of calculations, monthly amounts, annual amounts, single payments, percent of salary, capped percentages, etc. So we have a lot of calculations that are satisfied in the U.S. and Canadian markets. If you have additional types of calculations that we need to add in, we're more than happy to add those in. Where the rubber hits the road is that you can either treat the employee as a salaried employee working a full year at a particular salary. You can specify their benefits and give them a rate change, maybe a 3% increase in pay starting in the 6th month. You can get a preview of what you've done here by clicking the magnifying glass. You can see the total burden. I actually split this employee across 3 different departments, Department 100, 200, and 300. Well, how did we do that? We actually used this bottom half of the screen. I did not hire the person on until March. They came in halfway through March, so 50% FTE that month, 100% in the month of April. Once they are trained in that one department, we split them 3 ways between these departments. Then in October, they decided to go back to school. We're anticipating this is just a seasonal hire, so we'll zero it back out at the end of the year. So late starts, early terminations, and employee splits. Alternatively, we could have used a hourly type of screen. If you wanted to enter the number of hours worked by person by pay period, you could go ahead and do so. In here, we have the ability to specify those hours worked by pay period. The green pay periods are straight time. You could have had 12 months, could have had 26 pay periods, you could have had 52 weeks. The yellow pay periods are for the overtime. Again, you've got the tax and benefit elections way off to the right over here. Similar type of functionality in the screen, just instead of assuming that you're working the whole year and or specifying an FTE percentage, full-time equivalent percentage by month. This allows you to input the number of working hours by pay period. So a little bit more detailed. We have lots and lots of styles of allocations. We have the ability to import data from Excel. We have the ability to export data back out to GP. I have an entire hour-long course for GPUG on how not to accidentally delete, vaporize, or corrupt your budgets. So we know where people trip and built a better way to approach the budgets. Fill your shopping cart up with the data you want to send to GP. Choose the destination that you're going to send that budget to. Give yourself an explanation. 10% higher revs in Department 200. Go ahead and export this out. And lo and behold, we double check to make sure that the company matches the company, that the year of the budget, 17's budget, matches the year. Oops, I chose 18, I meant 17. I'll go ahead and export that out one more time. We also track to make sure that all of the individual accounts exist in GP. If you're not on GP 2016 R2 or later, you run the risk of importing into Excel. Okay, now if you had accidentally taken the third quarter forecast and overwrote the board-approved plan from 6 months ago, that would have passed our smell test because the same company, same year. We did not know. We would ask you to password protect in GP so you don't do that again. But we also got your back. Every time you export data to GP, we take a snapshot of what GP looked like before you potentially broke it. So you could simply grab this data set, resend it back up to GP before anyone's the wiser. We have duplicate functionality in here. We have, if you want to take last year's budget to create next year's budget, you simply come back in here and go ahead and do so. Another thing I want to point out is that we have a query analyzer built into the application. One of the biggest changes or differences between us and a lot of the competition is that if you're working with a hard fixed application, a predetermined web app, a SaaS application, you don't have access to the back end. You might want to make a quick manipulation and turn off all the budget accounts or mark them all as excluded and re-import, or do a combination of combining the description of your department code, the numeric and the description, to come up with a concatenation of those two pieces over here or whatnot. There are different ways that you might want to transform your data. We've built in the query analyzer and have a relatively straightforward table structure that you can actually come in here. Either your consultants or we can come in here and do some mass manipulations of the data, or if you have someone skilled on site, we can train them and orient them to our table structure and make some of those changes on their own. Show you some of our user security. In here we have the ability to specify different types of roles. Application user for the department heads, administrators restricted for someone, a finance person who can't touch payroll, and then a system manager is a full provisions, can do anything anywhere they want. If you want to provision somebody to just touch the payroll functionality, maybe this is your payroll specialist who comes in here and inputs payroll, but you don't want them breaking the chart of accounts. You could do something like that. You might have people with limited access rights. Maybe they only have access to particular departments. So we can actually test to see if we got the read and write permissions and give her the access to see things that smell like payroll, accounts that are marked as level 1 in confidentiality, but only at the summary level. So I can go choose our user named Abra, log in as if I'm her, and we can come in and see what her view of the world looks like. We could go ahead and drill down. I don't want to search on my Department 100. I want to see if corporate left me a back door and if I can look at the entire organization. And let's see what I get. I only get Department 100. Darn, they got it right. Okay, well, I want to see who's making that salary because it's not me. Oh, I don't have privileges to see payroll details. Okay. Well, I was told I was supposed to do my job and input the budget for training. Can I go do that? And sure enough, I can. Great. I get to put in all the line item details, but not snoop around and see what people are making for salaries instead of me. So we got the security permissions correct. We had a very quick and easy way to model that and test it out. And we built in a lot of those little features in here. Some of those other features that we built in time for our customers, ability to build a forecast. We could do a blend of actuals plus budget, or actuals plus last year, or actuals plus average run rate, an annualized approach. and use this to create a forecast next year simply by going to the import screen, clicking on my forecast, and I'm going to populate my forecast by clicking on the lookup, and I'm going to model all of my accounts using that template of blend of actuals plus the budget. Go ahead and grab all this data, put it back here on screen, include it, and go ahead and flash that into my forecast, populating my forecast with the blend of this year plus budget. So just a few button clicks, we can do complex operations like that, but we've tried to simplify it and make it an easy to use tool for you, the financial analysts who have to be responsible for working with all this data. Another common problem we run into is that people have large chart of accounts with a lot of cluttered legacy accounts that they have to step over. Well, we built in a little widget here to help you identify. So if I haven't used the account since 2016, show it here on screen, and if it wasn't active in the budgets and it wasn't active in actuals, mark it as do not budget, and then the next time I go to create my budget templates, I'm going to skip the ones that got flagged as do not budget. So we spent a lot of time adding in a lot of these little creature comforts to make the life of the financial analyst a lot easier. These are things that you don't necessarily find in reporting tools, but you find in a deep level budgeting tool like dynamic budgets. I just want to close out today thanking you for your participation. Here's our contact information: U.S. phone number +1 650 332 6651. Sales@Dynamic Budgets. Feel free to reach out. More than happy to arrange a demo of our product. If you'd like to test out our product or actually install the product on your network and allow your team to see your data flowing through the application. If you wanted to make that happen, usually IT has a few questions. So if you go to our Dynamic Budgets website, middle link here is what IT wants to know. It's a system overview, the requirements, installation process, and if they're paranoid, we even have the answer to what would it take to uninstall the program. All right, we look forward to working together. Thank you very much for your time.